What's up, everybody? Silent buttons have become a staple in the fighting game community. There's a lot of different ways to silence the buttons, and a lot of companies have tried a lot of different things. Sanwa's come out with a new generation of silent buttons that they just released a few weeks ago at Tokyo Game Show. So, we're going to take a quick look at them and see just how they did it and whether or not you guys are going to like them. My name's Jason, and this is FGC Tech Sanwa Silent Button Edition. Okay, so we've laid out an OBSF button here on the left and the new silent button here on the right. And at first glance, you're not going to notice any significant differences. Both of the bodies are manufactured the exact same way, and they both use Sanwa's standard micro switch inside. The first thing I did notice when I looked at the new silent button was if you look here on the standard button, you can see that there's a little tab that holds the plunger into the body of the housing. And if you look here on the new one, there is no tab. So that leads me to believe that they definitely changed something in the plunger assembly. Okay, now we got both buttons apart. You can see they're constructed the exact same way. They've got a housing, they both have switches, and they both have plungers. Now, as I said before, if you look very close at the housings, they are identical. There is no significant or any changes whatsoever between the old style and the new silent button housings. Here's a standard switch that came out of the yellow button here, and here's the switch that came out of the white button over here. As far as I can tell, these are identical and no difference. So now we get closer and we look at the caps, and here you can see on the yellow cap, it's all hard plastic. You can see that it's got two arms that hold the cap inside the housing when it's fully assembled. And that's how we're used to seeing buttons. You don't want these to fall off in the middle of play. Now, if we look a little bit closer at this white cap here, you'll see it's significantly different on the bottom. Instead of having almost full coverage of plastic, it's got 4 tabs here, and the center part looks almost identical to the original one. But the major difference is the material it's made out of. If you look here, and I can show you if I squeeze, you can see that there is some flex here that you don't necessarily get with the hard plastic of the yellow button. So that's difference number one. The bottom part of the cap is made out of a rubber material, not a hard plastic. If you look closer at the side here, the top is a similar type of feel as the bottom, whereas the top here on the yellow is still plastic. This is almost like a polished hard rubber on the top. So if we set that aside and we look even closer at the white button, you're going to notice that none of these arms have little tabs, so no little tabs will come in contact with the housing of the push button here. So that is one way they've reduced noise, is by getting rid of 2 interacting pieces of plastic. And you'll also notice that when I took the switch off, it actually gripped onto this very tightly, kind of like a Cherry MX switch, and that's because the rubber has a lot more friction than the hard plastic, so it holds onto the switch better. Now, the switches themselves and all of these Sanwa buttons, they've always been quiet. They have no clicks, they have no bumps, they have no tactile feedback. The noise has always been related to the plastic on plastic hitting when you push the button. And they've eliminated that with the new design of the buttons, because there is no more plastic on plastic hitting. There's just the rubber touching the plastic as you push down. Okay, so now that we got both the buttons reassembled, we can just do a cursory test here, and you can hear the click as I push that button. And what you'll notice is if we look here on the side as I do this, you can see that this arm is making contact with the lower portion of the button housing here. And that's where your noise is coming from. So when we do the exact same thing with the new silent button, it should be significantly quieter because there is no hard plastic making contact with the housing. And you can tell there is a noticeable difference in the sound. Let's do a little bit more of a scientific test and test the buttons against each other. What I've gotten on my phone here is an app called dB Meter Pro, and you can see that it's using the microphone in the phone to decide how loud it is in my room. Now, just me here talking, you can see that it's getting up to about 72 decibels just in my normal room. Here, I'll be quiet for a minute so you can see exactly how loud it is in my room without me yammering on. Okay, so we got about a 36 dB background baseline, if you will, on the app. So I'm going to try and do this identically with both buttons so we can get the most accurate results possible. So first things first, we'll use the yellow button here. And now we'll try it with the white. So as you can tell, there was a noticeable difference in measured acoustic noise between both buttons. Okay, so let's talk about the feel of the new silent button because it is different than the OBSF and different than the OBSF with silent pads installed. A common complaint with the silent pads was you could feel the button being a little mushy, and that was because as the button plunger came down, these little arms would make contact with the foam in the bottom of the button, and it would kind of dampen the sound by slowing the button down as it bottomed out. Now, you're going to have a similar yet a little less noticeable feel with these new buttons because instead of having the foam pad, as I mentioned earlier, the button housing, or excuse me, the plunger housing is made out of a harder rubber material that is still relatively soft compared to the ABS plastic used on the housing. And when you've pushed the button all the way down, you can feel it bottom out, and it is a softer feel when it bottoms out. So I'm not sure about you guys, but I'm excited to put a set of these in my own fight sticks. I've always been interested in trying new buttons and new technology just to see how well it works. There are some concerns I have with the rubber plungers and how well it's going to hold up over time. However, I have to trust that the engineers at Sanwa have taken that into account, and the material sciences are not something new, so they've probably been able to come up with something very long-lasting in these buttons. Now, that being said, the set that I've used today are prototypes, and by prototypes I mean a small batch that they did to give to vendors and select people at Tokyo Game Show this year to try out and provide some feedback. Now, when they get released, I'm sure there's going to be some subtle changes, but for the most part, I think this is pretty close to final form. I'm also interested to know what you think of the new buttons and the design. Is the limited amount of rubber squish in the bottom of the button still too much, or do you think it's going to be a significant improvement over the original foam pads at the bottom? In any case, let me know in the comments below, and until next time, make sure you hit subscribe, like, and follow me at Jasen's Customs on Twitter or facebook.com/JasensCustoms. And if you want to continue to see great content like this, make sure you pick something up on my website, www.jasenscustoms.com. Until next time, I'll catch you guys later.